Today we'll uncover the heartbreaking tale of Maire Rankin, an 81-year-old widow and a beloved mother of 8. Her peaceful life took a chilling turn on one fateful Christmas Eve, leading to a shocking discovery that left a lasting mark on their close-knit community. Today's case brings us to Ireland and to the city Newry, which is in Northern Ireland. Half of the city lies in the area of County Armagh and the other half in County Down. Newry is regarded as one of Ireland's premium shopping destinations. Its proximity to the Republic of Ireland's border makes it popular for people on both sides of Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. Known as the gateway to the north, Newry sits snugly amidst the Mourne Mountains and the Ring of Gullion. A fantastic place to grow up and raise a family. However, as we continue to cover these cases, no matter how friendly the people are or how beautiful the place is, a darkness can sometimes lurk in unsuspected places. This story begins with Maire Rankin, an 81-year-old widow. She lived on the Dublin Road in Newry, and she was a mother to 8, yes 8, and also a grandmother. She was described as a bubbly and traditional woman. She also loved a routine. So much so, a woman came to clean her house once a week, and Maire would break out the sherry and share a glass with her every week. As most people in their 80s, they are prone to health concerns. Maire had asthma and would suffer with this. And in December of 2008, she caught a chest infection as a result. Common enough for Maire, and one of her 8 kids would take turns staying with her over the Christmas period, just to keep a watching eye. Over the Christmas, Maire had plans to go to her daughter Brenda's house, and she would usually go over on Christmas Eve, but she cancelled last minute, as she was just getting over her sickness and she wanted to be in her own house while she recovered. And she had promised Brenda she would be over the next day, which was Christmas Day. But when Christmas Day came around, Maire didn't answer her phone. So her brother-in-law, he made his way to her house. When there was no answer on the front door, he let himself in with a set of keys. He then made his way up the stairs, not knowing what he's about to see. And when he got to the top of the stairs, he had a look around. That's when he seen Maire laying naked on her bedroom floor. She was laying nearby a crucifix that belonged in her bedroom wall, but it was now broken and laying near Maire's lifeless body. It was clear to Maire's family she hadn't taken a fall, and she had in fact been attacked. The police were immediately called and the house was sealed off as a crime scene. The PSNI, which is the police service in Northern Ireland, they stated this was a gruesome murder. There were no signs of forced entry to her home, however the back door was left ajar. They said there was in fact a struggle in the living room, but there was no signs of a robbery or anything missing from Maire's home. The post-mortem took place on the 26th of December, and on the 27th the results came in, and it was revealed she had passed away as a result of the deadly assault that night. It also revealed she was the victim of a sexual assault, and she had obtained multiple head injuries in the assault. And within hours of the results, a man aged 39 and a woman aged 42 were arrested. It was reported the 2 suspects knew Maire, but they had no relation to her. On the 31st of December, 42-year-old Karen Walsh, a pharmacist, was charged with murder. She denied any involvement in the murder and made no requests for bail. She and her husband owned a home in Newry on the Dublin Road, which was right next to Maire Rankin's home. They owned multiple properties, and they would spend their weekends in Newry, in what they called their holiday home. They owned another property in Dublin, where they would spend most of their weekdays. Let's go into a little bit of the background of Karen. Karen was brought up in a middle-class Galway. Her family were all high achievers, and Karen would attend Salt Hill Secondary School in Galway City before completing her degree in biochemistry in NUI Galway. From here she travelled to the United Kingdom and completed a pharmacy degree in the University of Sunderland, which led her onto her pharmacy job she was in now. Her husband Richard Durkin was a financial advisor and a prominent figure in the pharmaceutical business. They got married in 2004 and had a son named James 2 years later. Fast forward to the 7th of January 2009. Crowds filled St Mary's of the Assumption Church for the funeral of Maire Rankin. Primary school children formed a guard of honour for Maire when her coffin was removed for burial. Late January, Karen Walsh applied for bail, and she said her side of the story. She said she called over to Maire's on Christmas Eve, and she had a bottle of vodka with her. She was intending to have a drink with her, along with stopping by other neighbours' houses, but they were not in. The police, however, remained stern in the fact that Karen was the main suspect, and said there was an attempt at cleaning the scene and Mrs. Rankin's body. They also had evidence a couple of unsuccessful phone calls were made from Maire's phone on the morning of the 25th, and the numbers that were dialed were very similar to Karen's husband's phone number. After Karen's arrest, a number of bruises were noted on her body. When questioned about these bruises, she said they happened while pulling heavy items up her stairs. Forensic, however, didn't agree, and they said the bruises were not consistent with this story. Karen would go on to change her story on how she got the bruises, and when this one was checked, again, it didn't match up. Karen's bail was refused and she would remain in custody. However, not for long, as 2 weeks later, her legal team submitted another bail request on the grounds of not enough evidence to establish a motive for Maire Rankin's murder, and that Karen Walsh had no motive to murder her, and this bail request was successful. However, she was made to hand over her passport before being released. Very soon after Karen's release, she was rearrested. The PSNI had reason to believe she was a flight risk and she would attempt to flee the country. She was then released a week later on the 15th of June 2009. She was brought back to court to discuss the bail issues. This time the Gardaí had received more concrete evidence, which tied Karen Walsh to the crime. They had her DNA on the broken crucifix found near Maire's body. However, Karen was yet again granted bail, with some exceptions this time. She was to be housed in Belfast until her next court hearing, instead of her choice of residence, which was in Dublin. And here she would remain until her trial date, which finally began on Wednesday, September the 14th, 2011. Photographs of the crime scene and Maire Rankin's home were shown to the jury, along with all of the evidence they had gathered, including physical DNA, phone records, and a witness testimony placing Karen at the scene of the crime that night. One of Maire's daughters also took to the stand. Anya said she spoke to her mother around 11 PM on Christmas Eve. Maire told her that she had said her prayers, like she did every night, and that she was heading up to bed to watch midnight mass on the TV. She said her mother wasn't able to attend the midnight mass in person that year, as she was sick and recovering from a chest infection, so she had to settle for watching it on TV. Arthur, Maire's brother-in-law, the man who found Maire, also gave evidence. He spoke of finding Maire that night. And Brenda Rankin, another one of Maire's daughters, also took to the stand. This was her mother's first night alone on Christmas Eve, and that she was supposed to be staying at hers that night. She expressed her regret she was unable to persuade her mother to stay that night. She also went on to say Karen Walsh had been kind enough to lend her mother a plug-in heater when her boiler had broke, and that her mother had a present ready to give to Karen's young son, James. More of the Rankin family would take the stand throughout the trial. They described her as being meticulous and being very careful and particular of how she dressed and presented herself. She was a very proud and independent woman by all accounts. A forensic medical officer placed Maire Rankin's time of death as having occurred at some time late Christmas Eve, or the early hours of Christmas morning. Evidence was heard from a number of PSNI officers regarding Karen Walsh and her husband in the immediate aftermath of the murder. A detective said he had arrested Karen Walsh on the 27th of December in Newry. Karen had asked numerous times if Maire was beaten during the conversation. She said she only had spent 30 minutes in her house on Christmas Eve, and when she was leaving, Maire was in bed. The next morning, she said her husband had noticed something was going on at Maire's home, and the area was sealed off. Evidence was presented that Karen Walsh's DNA had been found on numerous items in Maire's home, including the litre bottle of vodka and the alleged murder weapon, the Crucifix. It was determined in the trial Maire had suffered 16 fractures to her ribs, along with multiple blows to her head, and her underlying medical conditions like high blood pressure and chronic asthma had caused her death. Injuries on her face and head resembled a crown of thorns on the crucifix, which lay beside her that night. The court then went on and reviewed a recording of Karen Walsh when she was questioned on the 26th of December. At this time, she was treated as a witness in the case, and as the interview was played to the jury, she looked at the floor and appeared calm. Then on the 28th of September, Karen Walsh took to the stand in her own defence after speaking on her education, background and family life. She told the court that she called over to Mrs. Rankin's home late on Christmas Eve. She wanted to give her a Christmas card. Initially, she had gone over to another neighbour's house to deliver another Christmas card along with a bottle of vodka, but they were not in, so she had moved on to Maire's home. She said she was buzzed into the house by an intercom and seeing Maire on a rocking chair in her dressing gown and covered with a duvet. She said she helped Maire into bed and she sat at the end of her bed beginning to drink the litre of vodka, which she intended to give to her neighbour. She went on saying she laid across the foot of her bed and heard Maire wheezing. She said she went downstairs to try find an inhaler for her, but she couldn't find it. Karen Walsh then said she asked Maire over to hers for the night, in case there were any issues, but Maire insisted that she would be okay, and she would be seeing family early in the morning. Karen then stated to the court she left Maire's home at around 2:30 in the morning. Karen was then cross-examined by the prosecution as to why she didn't go into Maire's kitchen to look for the inhaler, when she had initially told the police that she had. Karen had no explanation in the differences in statements she had previously given to the police and the one she was telling the courts now. It was also put forward that it wasn't normal to go and visit an elderly neighbour at that hour, and especially with a bottle of vodka, and perhaps Karen was finding refuge in Maire's house so she could drink the alcohol out of sight of her disapproving husband. Maybe Maire had told Karen off, told her she should have been at home with her young son, and maybe Karen seeing red and attacked Maire with the crucifix, and she sexually assaulted Maire to make it look like a male intruder had been the one to attack her. Karen visibly shook her head in the court as this was being said and denied this. However, the evidence against Karen Walsh was overwhelming, and on Tuesday, October 4th, 2011, the jury returned with their verdict. Karen Walsh was found guilty for the murder of 81-year-old Maire Rankin, and it had taken the jury less than 2 hours of discussions to come to the verdict. Karen didn't react when the verdict was read out, and she was handed down a minimum sentence of 20 years. This was in a separate sentence hearing in the weeks that followed. When she was led from the court to begin her term in prison, she turned and said, "I'm completely innocent." One of Maire Rankin's daughters, Emily, she told the Belfast Telegraph afterwards, and I quote, "My mother had the right to feel secure in her own home, but because of her trusting nature and kindness, she was subjected to an horrific murder. She died alone and frightened." End quote. After the trial, it was found the total cost for Karen's legal aid was 218,000 Great British pounds. A lot of people were outraged by this. You see, Karen and her husband, they had a lot of money, and they owned multiple houses whilst having their hand in a lot of businesses. They were not short on money, yet they were still granted legal aid, free of charge. The public were understandably furious at the legal system in place, and this led to calls to exclude well-off individuals from the legal aid system. Further investigation would find a huge amount of taxpayers' money was being used to defend Northern Ireland criminals. In the year of 2012 alone, the bill for defending just 14 people convicted of murder was a staggering 2 million Great British pounds. From this, a plan was put in place to recover legal aid costs from wealthy defendants in future cases. In the documentary The Murder Next Door, they done an episode on Maire Rankin's case. This doc examines the experiences of people who have become involved in disputes with those they live beside, and it covered Maire Rankin's case. It also highlighted a witness who was also held in Hyde Banks prison. The witness said Karen confessed to killing her elderly neighbour, all because she scolded her about drinking. The witness went on to say, and I quote, "The older lady started lecturing her, all this drinking and everything else, telling her, Karen, that she was ruining her life, being so drunk. She, Karen, didn't want to listen. The way she, Karen, said it to me, that the lady, Miss Rankin, had taken hold of her and said, 'Listen to me.' She, Karen, said she pushed her away and the lady lost her balance and hit her head. She, Karen, said she hit her head with a crucifix. She, Karen, said she didn't realise how hard she hit her because it broke. She then went on to do unspeakable things to try cover up what she had done." The frantic 911 call made by Brenda Rankin after discovering her mother's body was also played during the documentary. And that's it. Karen Walsh attempted to appeal the conviction with further court dates in 2015, but her appeal was denied and Karen Walsh would go on to serve her 20-year minimum sentence. After the judgment was delivered, Brenda Rankin made a statement. She said, and I quote, "There is a very dangerous and evil person who seems to have manipulated every aspect of the court system. It seems that Karen Walsh has been pulling the strings of the legal system and they have indulged her at every whim." End quote. Maire's family will go on to miss their loved one, especially at the events where Maire would always be present. Instead, they would remember her laughter and the love she had for each one of them. Between her children, grandchildren and 7 great-grandchildren, Maire will never be forgotten. Thank you for watching. I will see you on the next one.